Everybody's patience. It's a couple of minutes after 5. I'll call the meeting to order. The first order of business will be discussion of the working waterfront conceptual plan. Ms. Jessica Walker and the selection team. Hey, Jessica.
Hey, thank you, gentlemen, for having this meeting today so that we could bring this to you. Since last summer, when we selected GMC as our engineering firm for the working waterfront plan, we have been working diligently to put together a great conceptual plan for you to see. What you'll see tonight is something that has been put together as a result of a lot of the community engagement that we've done. That engagement started in February and has kind of been ongoing. We are lucky to have Jimmy Conyers on our selection committee. He has been part of that with us. One thing I will ask you as you go through this plan tonight and through the presentation, if you have a question, if you will ask it when you have it. We normally would reserve that to the end, but obviously things are a little bit different tonight logistically. So if you have a question, go ahead and ask it when you have it. We may be able to address it then. They may be able to push it off. I do want to kind of cede to Councilman Conyers right now because I want him to speak to his part in this and what he has seen as well.
Sure. I'd just like to say that, just to remind you, thank you, Jessica. We had a good-sized team that worked on this, and this has been in process since July when the selection committee basically heard the proposals from the different engineering firms. In August is when the council voted with the committee's recommendation and selected Goodwin Mills and Kaywood to perform this project, and they worked for basically from September to January, been working on this, and then in February we started the citizen engagement. There was an online survey. There was the state of the city. We had y'all remember the little pictures with the dots, and you could go put dots on which were your favorite pictures. And then we had several long meetings in February where we met and went through the results of that. So I would say by the time we've gotten to this point, what you're going to see is a refined process that has really gone through a lot of has grown a lot, has had a metamorphosis almost. You know, the project started with maybe a vision here and then lots of input along the way. So what you've got, the final project that's being presented, certainly council weigh in with your suggestions and ideas, but there was a lot of give and take to arrive where GMC is going to land. So I look forward to seeing what y'all think of the final presentation.
Thank you, Councilman Conyers.
Yes, sir.
My name is Brandon Bias. I'm a planner here in the local office of Goodwin Mills and Kaywood. And I'm going to kind of kick off the presentation, kind of start about the process that we went through, talk about the engagement. And then I'm going to turn it over to Christian Preuss, as a local landscape architect here in Fairhope who's been involved with the project, as well as Scott Hutchinson, an engineer on the project as well. So just kind of real briefly, the agenda that we have, I'm going to talk about the engagement component of this project and how we use the information that we gathered from the community throughout this to inform the design that we have. And then I'm going to touch briefly on the program, the pieces of the plan and how they've come together into this kind of preliminary waterfront master plan. And then Christian's going to get into more of the nuts and bolts of the analysis and the actual master plan drawing itself. And then Scott's going to kind of bring it around with the next steps in the process we have to go through from here. As Councilman Conyers mentioned a second ago, we started this process through the public engagement portion of this process in the State of the City on February 6th. Over at the Civic Center next door, we had several large boards with several images. And what we were trying to do was kind of understand what inspired the community in terms of project waterfront amenities, opportunities, things about the park they do and don't like, to help us kind of understand and paint that picture of what could happen along the waterfront here in Fairhope. We estimated we had roughly 164 participants in that activity. Everybody was given three green dots to really vote on these images. We had roughly 493 dots across those three boards. A real good sense of what inspired the community coming out of that State of the City engagement. That same night, we opened up a community survey. A survey was promoted through the city's Facebook feed, newsletter, and other ways to really open this up, try to get as much other involvement beyond that. Throughout the survey, we asked several questions about what was important. We talked about specific things that could be done in the park, whether it's different waterfront treatments or playground improvements or fountains and all sorts of different things that could have been included to really gauge that sense of what the community expects or wants in the waterfront. And we also, again, we had some more of those to kind of understand what inspired what options were out there. And we had that survey open a little over a month, a little over a month this year. And during that, we collected 460 responses. So we feel like we had a really good cross-section. Who was in the community providing us info. So we took those two engagement points, and then we rolled into our design charrette. And what this was a 5-day design process, and when our entire team was here working together on the project. We met over at the Nick Center, and we had a lot of different points of contact with the steering committee, with several focus groups, people coming in that we were presenting the results of the surveys, results of the State of the City engagement, and really trying to start to understand what these things meant and how a design would start to look. So we used all these discussions that we had and worked with our design team to actually put together a preliminary master plan. And that master plan Christian's going to present in just a second. But the focus of that design charrette was that intense period in which we were all working together to try to come to a resolution and build consensus around a future plan. Also coming out of that charrette was the idea of a defined program. And what you see here are a few bullets of things that we knew that we needed to include for this master plan to be successful. The first of which is really reinforcing pedestrian connectivity. This park it's right on the waterfront. It's surrounded by several neighborhoods. It's walkable to downtown. We needed to make sure people could get to it and access the park safely. We wanted there to be an appropriate placement of parking on the site. We realized that parking is important. People do drive to the site from all over the city, from all over the region, and wanted to make sure that parking was on the right place on the site. Currently, right now, parking, and you'll see in some diagrams in just a second, is very close to the water's edge. This is a waterfront park. So we see that as very valuable, very important pieces of the park that are being taken up by parking right now. We wanted to take the opportunity through the bluff stabilization component of the project and look at ways that we could use that bluff space for both active and passive recreation. We have to come in as part of this grant and reinforce that bluff to prevent it from continuing to fail. So looking at ways, how can we activate that space and make it useful in that process? We wanted an active interface with the bay. This is a waterfront park, and the community here cares deeply about that. We wanted to look at ways to now use that waterfront and make it active where people can go and enjoy it like they do in so many other places around the region. Pier improvements is something that really rose to the top of the discussion for us. It was something that we see as now being very important to improve some of the user experience along the pier through some very strategic improvements. We also saw a lot of feedback on the need of a restroom in the South Beach Park area. This was just about the time the restroom improvements were opening on North Beach. We realized there's a restroom on the pier, but we also heard a lot of need for a restroom in the South Beach area as well. The idea of a central formal space became very important to our team as we went through that charrette. We had a lot of discussions about how that looks and what it should feel like and things like that, because it's something that we realize it's at the core of the community's love for this park, is that space in the park, needing to have some of that formal circulation down along the water. We had discussions about a potential ferry connection near the pier. Knowing that the history of this pier was being part of a ferry terminal connection, is that potentially could come back in the future. And while we may not be programming that directly, we want to make sure we recognize that as a potential future and have space for that in the future. And then finally, the marina is a really important component there at the waterfront. We want to make sure we integrate that and the yacht basin and potential improvements there to make that facility more feasible in the future. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Christian to talk a little bit about site analysis and get into the plan.
It's my first non-Zoom meeting in about a month, so bear with me. So all of y'all are very familiar with this site, looking at about 10 acres within the project area. About 1,500 linear feet of waterfront along the water's edge from just to the north of the roundabout and the fountain area to the south. And so special place for all the community of Fairhope. And really, we understand that this park is not just a local attraction, but a regional draw as well. So that waterfront treatment is critical. The pier itself is around 1,500 linear feet as well. So figuring out how to make those improvements in a manner that makes that the visitor experience and the locals experience utilizing the pier even more special. When we look at the context of the site related to Fairhope, you can see in this diagram just the walkable nature of what's in proximity, a walkable proximity to the waterfront. The circles or radial elements in the diagram represent a 5 and 10 minute walk respectively. And so really within around an 8-minute walk to the downtown, and this really is a true bookend to the edge of Fairhope. We also looked at solar angles relative to the site. The red element in this graph represents the pier, and then the other arcs represent the solar angles at various times of the year. And so recognizing that sunsets play a major role in how people use the waterfront, and we just wanted to understand that better as we looked at our site. This site encompasses Fairhope life. It really extends the value of the waterfront to the entire community, not just the people that can afford to live right up next to it. So it provides that accessible connection to the water as well. And it's one of the first things that people mention to us in the civic engagement is that's where they take people to show off Fairhope and show them what Fairhope's all about. Obviously, amazing views. The sunsets are spectacular. The thing that really was reinforced in the survey is just the need or the desire for pier improvements and just upgrading some of the amenities along the pier, and really enforcing that restaurant as a destination for Fairhope residents. There are several challenges, as I'm sure you're aware of some of them. Brandon pointed out some of the connectivity issues, really from downtown to the waterfront. You have some pretty steep topography, and so working through that and making those connections easier and safer. Really, also from a walkable framework, the bluff is about 30 feet higher than the lower level waterfront. So traversing that grade, other than the steps that are currently there, is one of the things we spend a lot of time evaluating. And then parking, as you look at this site and realize the amount of infrastructure on arguably one of the most valuable pieces of property on Mobile Bay is dedicated to parking, it really negates some of the value of what could be a significant green space. And so our steering committee went through several different concepts. As you will be able to see, some of the good ideas that came out of that process really morphed into a beautiful plan. Some of the organization of the site is fragmented. That's a way to put it nicely. There's some awkward period transitions from the formal nature of the gardens to the public works trash cans to the benches that are down there that are somewhat dated. And while we want to pay homage to those elements that are down there and special to people, we want to make sure that everything is cohesive as we go into the development of the waterfront. The edges are especially a factor in this park design. The grants are specifically regulated towards waterfront stabilization and the bluff stabilization, and so that is really some of the main drivers is making this a more resilient waterfront. And so we're dealing with the bluff, the waterfront, and the beach conditions that all need to be tied together into an entire waterfront park. Looking at some of just the site as we dig into some of the details on the site, there is an underutilized area to the north as you extend from the roundabout to North Beach. That's basically an underutilized green space that has no real waterfront value other than people just kind of passing between the roundabout and the North Beach parking infrastructure. The significant terrain I mentioned earlier, you are dealing with a bluff condition, which creates some wonderful views, but also some challenging erosion issues. A lot of important views. I mentioned the connection on Fairhope Avenue as it connects to the waterfront. There's some challenges there from a grade standpoint, as well as just the safety standpoint, with vehicles coming around that corner on a mobile pretty fast, and pedestrians trying to cross and enter the waterfront in that location. Also, just the edge along Mobile Street and the interface with the park and pedestrians running alongside the park, it creates some challenges as you're driving or biking and walking along that edge. And so we wanted to look at that and how we could improve that from a pedestrian safety standpoint. And then you look at the bluff and making those pedestrian connections between the bluff and the waterfront. You see again that topography takes up a significant portion of the waterfront green space, and so as Brandon mentioned, we want to see how we can utilize that and maximize that as a feature of this park. One of the opportunity zones that we figured out as we were looking at the entire footprint of the site is the far beach on the southern end, and how we could incorporate that or expand upon that as a major feature in this park is one of the things we looked substantially at. And then the bulkhead that's currently failing, repairing that and blending that more into the waterfront, as well as the core part of what we see as the waterfront area where the existing rose garden and fountain are, and the amount of parking infrastructure that's dedicated right there. It really fragments the space, as you can see in this diagram. It minimizes the green space that's along the water's edge and really depletes the value there. While a significant portion of that is dedicated to the rose garden area, there's a big separation between the rose garden experience and the waterfront experience. And then the pier, just building on what was said in the survey, how we can improve that interface makes that entire waterfront experience from the land side to the water side even much more valuable. And so we looked at the pier and breaking it up into districts. Since it is such a long distance, it does have character attributes in these different segments. We consider the area coming from the waterfront into the pier as the gateway district, and then as you get to the marina area and restaurant, that would be the marina district. And then one of the best spots, arguably, on the pier is just to the in that turquoise area with the circular element. We see that as an opportunity to potentially have an expanded deck and potential access to the water. That could be a location for a ferry terminal if that ever came to fruition. And so really it becomes a destination for tourists and visitors to come out to the pier and create a little more area to congregate alongside the pier, as well as a potentially better interface with the water. And then the last district would be the fishing district, which would really cater to the fishermen and start to look at the different characters of treatments along those areas, from railing to lighting, benches, and needs for fishermen on the far end of the pier, or some of the things that we're looking at as we get into further design. And so this is the master plan that evolved from that intensive workshop. We did go through, we started with meeting with focus groups and the steering committee, working through their feedback, showing them some of the precedents that we were thinking about, and then taking their input in the first 2 days, developed 2 conceptual plans, and then had the steering committee members go through the conceptual plans after being presented to them. And they evaluated the plans and really told us the things that they liked and did not like about the plans that were presented. And taking the dialogue and the feedback from that meeting at the schematic level, we took those ideas and morphed them into one final vision. And this still is obviously at a conceptual stage, and love to get your feedback at this point before more design and engineering is accomplished. But this is a great point to present this to you. As you look at the site, Mobile Street is on the top end, and so the entrance to the waterfront is being looked at as potentially a three-way stop condition there, with some restructuring of that intersection to create a safer connection for pedestrians, and so that would be, a scenario where people would turn into the waterfront, really calling attention to that as its own place with a gateway sign. And then as you look at the bluff itself along Mobile Street, looking at putting parallel parking along that edge, there's just about enough pavement to do that, so only a couple of feet would be needed to accommodate that, because the road is so wide in that area. And this would reinforce that pedestrian safety along that edge, and create a better condition for people parking along the Mobile Street. And then one of the big moves in this plan is to create some retaining structures by the gully, and then tapering into the park, and that would help stabilize the bluff, and also create opportunities for vegetated terraces to help soften that condition that's currently there. And then it would allow people to traverse from the top level to the lower level at a less than ADA slope, so there would not be any condition where there'd be ramps or railing. You would be able to walk continuously or push a stroller continuously from the top side of the bluff to the bottom, and so this creates an ideal scenario to make the park all inclusive for ADA use, as well as elderly or moms with strollers, and then in the edge on the green space to the right, you see the terraces going down to the beach, to a new beach. That would be considered the sunset seating gallery, with seat walls on terraces of lawn that could be some trees planted back in there for shade. But that makes that bluff elevation spread out over the entire width of the waterfront park there. Also looking at a restroom being incorporated into that concourse level walkway that goes kind of in the middle of the green lawn terrace area, and so that would be actually built into the retaining wall and into the bluff, and would not obstruct views from Mobile Street. And then as you get into the core part of the waterfront, the circulation system changes quite a bit, but it pays homage to the desires to keep a formal centerpiece, with a fountain in the center of the axis of the road tying in to the waterfront, with a roundabout, with the drop off at the near the pier, but the circulation would be such that people come down and make a loop and go back out, which is a tradition here in Fairhope, but also gives you the opportunity to park within a few feet of where the parking once was in this plan. And what, as you see from the previous diagrams and looking at this one, how much of that waterfront is dedicated to green space now, as opposed to parking at that pinnacle point in Fairhope. And then you have an opportunity to create a gateway into the pier and call more attention to that, with swings along the walkways here that allow people to sit and watch the sunset. And then this newly created beach, a lot of the feedback that we received in the survey, as well as the civic engagement, was that people really like the idea of a softened edge there, which would entail sand, and so they love the idea of having this beach along the waterfront here. And so as we respected that desire, we created a nice sized beach that ties into the existing beach that I mentioned as that opportunity zone to the south. and really creates a unique experience and allows people to, rather than standing on top of a bulkhead and not being able to interface with the water, they're able to access the water easily as they wanted to, with some steps in the area bridging the gap between the vertical height of the current wall that's there where the parking is down to a lower level at the beach level. And so that would accommodate a great spot for, again, viewing the sunset, or for events, small events with a pavilion at the top of those steps. And then looking at that opportunity zone to the north, the area that's currently, there's some driveways and an improved restroom on that north end. We would just repurpose that entire area that was parking that we're now repurposing as green space. We're mitigating that parking just about the same number that was in that area to the north beach and into that opportunity zone, with access walkways on both sides that tie you into the waterfront framework, and connections to the existing pier, as well as a potential ramp for kayakers to get their boats down to the water's edge. So as we look at this in perspective, looking out over the pier back towards the waterfront, you can kind of see this in 3 dimension as you look at the rose garden and fountain. Arguably, I know it is the same square footage as currently there in Rose Garden, is still dedicated to Rose Garden and fountain space in that roundabout. And then you have the increased green space along the water's edge with a railing and gateway elements. And then as you traverse into the South Beach Park, you have a newly created beach with the terracing system and the walks that take you up to the bluff edge, and it really creates a nice sequence of being able to view the water as well as the sunsets from that terrace green space. And then you can see the gateway element as you come into the site from Mobile Street, and just how all that framework is substantially improved. And as you look out over the terrace, it just creates a nice, usable space transitioning down from the top level to the waterfront level. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Hutchinson to talk about next steps on the plan.
Thank you, Chris. What we have been doing since this was first created was taking this really good-looking picture and getting all engineering with it. And we took the existing topo that we performed of the whole area and basically dropped that on the topo, and then we started doing some grading work, trying to identify any potential fatal flaws, because we didn't want something that looked so great just to not be able to work just because of topography or things like that. What we've determined, fortunately, is that we can make it work, and we've done quite a bit of preliminary grading to confirm that. Was really excited to see that transition from the top of the bluff all the way down to the bottom to be able to be done without any ramps or anything like that, as Christian mentioned. And the parking spaces, once we drew it to scale and put the appropriate size spaces in and all that, worked out really well too. So for right now, I'm happy to say it appears to work, and what we're looking for is obviously some feedback and some guidance on we're ready to move forward with design and permitting. The critical factor for us to meet the deadline that we have to meet next spring is permitting, primarily for the beach. I mean, any features in the water require core permitting, and there's time associated with that, as you know, and so the sooner we get started on that permit, the better off we'll be on meeting the schedule. Nothing else I really see is has any problems created by the current condition of the virus we're all dealing with. But the ability to move forward with the permitting is pretty important. So just love to answer any questions that you have, and we're excited to present this. I'm excited. It looks like something I can't wait to see come to fruition.
Council, questions?
I have one. The existing retaining wall around the pier gateway that failed last year, is there any design work to decide whether or not more extensive repairs need to be done to keep that wall safe? Or my understanding, everything we did was a Band-Aid.
I would say yes. It's currently staying a Band-Aid and until we implemented what we have planned here, which is to basically remove that bulkhead and replace it with some hardened edges, and then build the beach. The beach that you see is really where that bulkhead is failing.
Well, actually, it's the bulkhead that failed is more around the pier
Well,
gateway.
see the curve there that you see on the south side of the pier, where we have the beach starting. It's kind of where that hard concrete wall ends, and
Right.
the old bulkhead starts. That's kind of where the beach and the rock would start.
But the bulkhead or the retaining wall I'm referring to is at the pier itself. That concrete wall at the pier
I'm sorry. I
itself.
thought you were talking about that.
Not the old wood one, no. This is the concrete existing pier or retaining wall starting at the gateway, heading left and right.
Okay, sorry. No, I thought you were
That,
talking about
is anything gonna be done with that?
Well, we'll just like other pier improvements or repairs, that'll be repaired, not anything. We're not proposing any new type of wall there or anything like that. Just
I mean, is there any study gonna be done or looked at as far, because it's obviously relatively old, and the way I understand it, the Deadheads gateway.
that I don't know. We'll definitely take a look at it. We'll have some geotech work.
All this looks real nice, but that's mostly what I'm interested in, because if that wall falls in, we got a real problem with all this money being spent on other things.
I understand. We'll look at it.
Scott, I have a question about budget. Can we do all of this with the funds that we're going to be receiving, or is this going to bust the budget and we're going to have to come out of pocket?
Our bet was that you would ask that question.
I hope you bet on that question being asked.
Right, great question. From what we've done is we're taking that preliminary design, and which essentially was a grading plan, that rough grading plan, and then we looked at all the big ticket items of asphalt, concrete, retaining walls, dirt, fill, and landscape, and everything we could put down right now, and putting those numbers together, and then using the appropriate percentage added to that to do a rough order of magnitude estimate, is what we call it. It appears that we can accomplish this with. Was that vague enough answer?
Sure. It appears. I was betting you were going to answer that way.
Well,
another question.
we did the best. Yeah, we as engineers and architects and landscape architects, we have the ability to see a lot of different jobs and a lot of different costs. So our costs are pretty decent. We can only work with the data we have right now. We're not far enough into the design to give you a really great answer, but we can give you we feel good about it answer.
And Christian, you may have covered this. You covered a lot, and thank you for that. The parking area, is that going to be pervious parking or impervious parking, or has that been discussed?
So, then just to kind of build on that, so good question related to materials. Once the council gives us direction that this is the framework plan that we're tasked to moving forward with, we will start to look at various finishes of hardscape, landscape, start to look at lighting fixtures, site furnishings, all those elements that will start to really give you the finishes of the site. So really materials, we're using, placeholder materials for cost, but nothing's been decided as far as that level of detail. So we would foresee the next step being more of a design development with this plan, looking at materials as an overlay.
Yeah. I don't even know if pervious parking is that crucial when you're just feet from the bay. Maybe it's more crucial. I don't know. Maybe you got
I wouldn't think
put
you
it in
could
the
either.
catch basin, or just let it run right off into the bay, because it's gonna, I don't know how much of it goes into the sand and then into the bay anyway. I don't know.
Well, we'll be looking at all that, and a lot of things that play a factor in that are drainage. Obviously the drainage infrastructure needs to be in place for that, and how much stormwater we're creating. We want to try to be as sustainable as possible, but cost conscious as well.
Well, I think about pavement, and I think about oil slicks and, just dripping out from under cars, and then it runs into, stuff like that.
Yeah, there's things that we can do relative to just green infrastructure with the landscape or with hardscape for being cognizant of removing those pollutants as close as you are to the bay.
Okay. Council?
Yeah, I've got a question. Christian Scott, the one thing that concerns me, and I thought about this when I saw the presentation on the video with Jessica. If you're traversing from the top of this bluff where that parallel parking, and you got the ramps that come down where the existing bluff is, and you end up down there at the beach, I'd like to see a section of that.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, to me, what we're doing is we're removing the park at the top of the bluff and putting a new park down there at the bottom of the bluff.
Yeah, I can, good question, Robert. This is really rough, but if I can reach this, the slope that we're keeping below 20%, so you don't have any ramps or anything like that, basically follows this pattern. From here, along here, we change this curve a little bit, and down to here. That gets you from the top to the bottom at less than 20%. This up here, we are not cutting in to the park up there, with the exception, in most cases, where this sidewalk right here is a little bayward of the drop off
Of the edge,
bluff,
okay.
The edge, yes. So we're not cutting into the
Okay.
park. Good question.
Well, with that being said, the colony deeded that property to the city without any, it has to be left as a park. I don't know if it has to be approved, whatever you do to that bluff or anything has to be approved through the colony in order to fool around with that park area.
Part
I
of
don't
this,
know.
part of this proposal was about making sure that that bluff was stabilized because we are losing so much of our bluffs. We wanted to start with this park, and then what I would like to do is do a second phase that incorporates the North Park. And that would be just strictly using the bluff areas as they are. They wouldn't be graded this way. I think what this ends up doing is giving citizens a lot of places to really view the sunset, which is what a lot of people go down there for. And you have a lot more interaction with the park. But the bluff stabilization and the working waterfront, those are things we have to do as part of the proposal to get the money. So that's the core of the heart of the proposal. And it did mention that we would be doing it really didn't look like this, but I didn't know what it was going to look like. I had a picture, but it's not really like that. But to build in a stormwater feature and have kind of steps going down so people can get down easily, because right now that's why we have so many cars, is because pedestrian wise it really isn't very walkable from the top to the bottom. So
When you say we're losing bluff, how much,
no, you're not losing.
no, but you're
making
saying
it
the
more-
bluff, we have to use bluff stabilization as part of
Oh,
this. And I
this
understand
is-
that, that's what the grant is, but what
Right.
kind of documentation we have that we're actually losing? There's 50, 75-year-old pine trees growing out of that bluff.
Well, we've added to the bluff, and over the years, we've had to add, and we're losing. In fact, north of the North beach where the duck pond is, there is a driveway, which it looks like it's private, but much of that driveway is our property. Those bluff areas are in dire need. I mean, they're crumbling.
And that's because water's running over the edge of it, but
I mean, it's in bad shape. And the ones along the bluff, as you enter into the North Park, a lot of those bluffs have been, over the years, stabilized and in some cases added to, because we've lost some of it. So, I mean, this is the beginning, but all of the bluffs are going to need to be addressed. They are absolutely, necessary to keep what we have. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of residential above it.
You guys need a nod tonight? Is that what y'all need?
We would love it, but
I mean,
Certainly understand.
we can't take official
We
action,
do
obviously.
a lot of
And I don't
actions.
think the official action is required, right, Jessica? Does anybody see any,
just
have any
wanna
heartache
get
or
input.
major changes?
So, no, it is not required, but we don't want to continue going down this if there are concerns that you have, which is one of the reasons why coming to you is so important to us. I think they've done an incredible job with the time that they've had, so we did want to make sure that we address any concerns you may have. We would love a nod. That would be awesome, because we are under the gun deadline-wise. But we understand that this is a lot of information, so.
Yeah. I like it. I don't know why. I really don't find anything I could pick on. The beach, I guess, maybe on the south side of the pier, that new sand beach, I don't know why. I kind of hesitate at it a little bit, maybe because now we got all these beaches to maintain. I don't know about how much we're going to have to re-nourish that beach. I do see the jetties, which maybe were intended to mitigate that. Not really sure how people are going to get there. Then they're going to walk down the hill from the parallel parking. The other thought I had was if you want to go to the main pier, the parking's quite a ways. I guess, they just have to, if somebody's handicapped, they'll, have to make it in a wheelchair or something like that. I
There's
guess
a
you could
drop
drop
off
them
point.
off right there, drop them
Yeah.
off in the front, yeah. Will there be like an unloading zone there, do you think? Room for a car to drive past another car if somebody's,
Yeah, I'll answer that one, and then the beach question as well. The right at the center flag, right here, as you get to the kind of the centerpiece that's on the axis with the gateway, the pier gateway, there'd be a drop probably for about 2 cars right there, or a bus or whatever. But that would be the dropping point. And then Councilman Burrell, we see those spots to the just to the north, right in front of the existing older restaurant and the Fireman's Hall.
Right.
Several of those would be dedicated to ADA parking spaces. And then lastly, on the beach part of it, I personally was hesitant to that as well, just thinking it would be more of a fixed waterfront. However, just based on the public input, the dialogue that we had at the state of the city, that was just a resounding element that kept coming up as a way to treat the waterfront, was the desire for a beach there. We have had the coastal engineers really overanalyze the shape and geometry of the layout of this beach, and they feel extremely confident that this would give us about 60 to 70 feet of good sand that would not require frequent renourishment. It's essentially the footprint model for the Grand Hotel beaches down there. So.
okay, that's a good analogy. Thank you.
Yeah, and to add on to that, the Grand Hotel beaches, we've never added any sand to those.
Right, yeah, I'm familiar with that one, so that's a great analogy. Yeah. Okay. Council, any other comments? Anybody have any reservations?
I just want to keep beating this dead horse, because I didn't think I got the answer I was quite looking for on that retaining wall.
Well,
And the reason is, it's kind of part of Jack's deal. If, worst case scenario, you got to tear the whole thing out and put a whole new one in. That's going to be a pretty good chunk of change. And it really needs to be looked at
we will look at it.
as far as what we're going to do with that wall, because, again, it did give way last summer. And there's a lot of problems because of the age of that wall. And from what I'm looking at here, I don't think a lot of study or a lot of thought was put into what to do with that wall.
We have not, no, we have not.
And
looked
should
at
we
it.
take it out, what's it going to do to add to the cost? Because that's a relatively expensive retaining wall because of the height and the location, everything about it.
Put riprap in front of it.
Huh?
Put riprap in front of it.
Well, I'm just saying, whatever you want to do is fine. It's just a function of, this is what the grant is actually for, is stabilizing that particular wall in essence.
Well,
And I think we need to do a lot more studying on it than what was done on it.
Well, we will.
Okay.
Thank you for pointing that out.
It was for stabilizing the bluffs, but that bulkhead, we definitely have to look at it. But that bulkhead was not part of this proposal per se, but we have to maintain it just like we would if we didn't have this project.
That's a good point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Any other comments before we move on to number 2? Thank you, guys, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, discussion of marketing plan when the city reopens for business. Mayor Wilson?
Yes, well, first of all, I kind of wanted to open it up with the fact that I know that all of y'all agree, I hope, that, supporting small business and trying to put it together a marketing plan that will help them rebound, it not only helps our local economy, but it helps the city recover as well, because sales tax is our #1 income. One of Fairhope's most important assets is the downtown area, the independent businesses and the entrepreneurs and personalities that make up these businesses. It's also the lion's share of our operating budget. So I think we're doing okay right now because of the cuts that we've made, but it's important, even if we weren't trying to recoup for the city budget, I think we have to really do our part to save some of these businesses, and I think many will close. How much do we want to look at? I mean, to put things in perspective, I have a small business, and I spend around $50,000 a year in advertising and PR, because we do a lot of events and so forth. And I am a tiny little business, and the city operating not only relies on the sales tax from businesses like mine, but we don't spend any money on small business. We give $21,000 to, I'm sorry, let me get my little list up here, what we appropriate right now. We spend $35,000 a year with Baldwin County Economic Development Alliance. We spend $15,000 a year for Eastern Shore Chamber. Of course, that's the whole Eastern Shore. $21,000 for Downtown Business Association, and it's good. We're investing in what they want to do locally, but that money is not enough to do the kind of scope I'm thinking of. So you've got the Downtown Business Association, but it is member-based, and I'm not sure how many members they have now, but it doesn't make up every business. And Eastern Shore Chamber is the same way. It's member-based, and there's not like a budget just for Fairhope, and Fairhope is unique. People don't really vacation in some of the other areas on the Eastern Shore. So it's balancing what we feel like our small businesses are worth with the fact that we're going to have to start it out with, I think, locals and talking about how important, spending dollars locally is now more than ever. And when it's safe, putting money towards tourism that piggybacks on what the Gulf Coast is doing. To do something and spend the money that they spend down in Orange Beach and Gulf Shores would be, we just could never afford it. But can we maybe look to a couple of billboards down there to entice people to come to Fairhope for the day? I definitely think that would be worthwhile, again, when it's safe. So I just put some preliminary numbers together, but I haven't reached out to anybody because we don't want to, I mean, we talk about the things that we feel like might work, but I want to ask, a marketing firm and get the professionals' help with this on prioritizing that spending. The part of the money that we give to the Baldwin County Economic Development Association is $20,000 economic grant that we get from AMEA. And in the past, we have tried to look to use this money for wayfinding signs, and we actually had a plan together. All of it was approved, and then the money went to Hatch. I support Hatch 100%. I think it's very good for Fairhope because we have a lot of entrepreneurs, and it fits right into what we're trying to do. But if we're going to look at supporting Hatch long-term, I don't think we should look at a grant that really should be for all businesses. It should be an appropriation. And I know Lee Lawson would feel a lot better knowing that there was something that was, if he's counting on this for his operating, I think that makes sense more than a $20,000 economic development that's really not going for the masses. And that's what we're trying to do right now. Let's see. I tried to look at also ways that we could long-term fund what I feel like is lacking in the city budget, and that is the investment in what makes our economy special. If you'll look at the spreadsheet that I gave out, you'll see on page 1 is sales tax, which we're not doing anything with. This is just to give you an idea of the different scenarios if sales tax was reduced. I'm not sure this included I think some are left off on this page because what I'm putting in the budget, I think is 30% decrease overall, which means that these numbers would be, we're going to have between now and September a lot lower sales tax than normal. But overall, for the whole year, we're going to be maybe down 30%. That's what I'm estimating. And lodging tax, which is on the second page, we're using 70%. And I think that's really very, very conservative because the numbers have been okay the first half of the year. But that's how I'm going to bank on how the projected 2020 budget will end up. So about a little over a year ago, I proposed the lodging tax that would be 7%. This is on the third spreadsheet. And here are all the cities in the county and what they charge for different taxes. And you'll see lodging kind of to the right of the middle, that column. And the average for cities that I think, we're looking at is 7%. So, I think Fairhope could do more than 7%, but the fact that it was approved for 6% is still lower than the average. And there's no reason why not to increase that by 1, because this is a tax that our citizens don't pay. Visitors expect to pay, and it's not an unfair amount since it is the average. So this 1%, I think, could be used exclusively for something like this. It's an investment into what I think will promote increasing sales tax long term. And then the other, and I mentioned this also in the budget review, the other proposal I had, if you'll look in the second box section of the third page, and it's all up here too, all the cities. They all have a city gas tax, and the city of Fairhope does not. A city gas tax is not going to increase money for the consumer. That is something that is absorbed because what you see when you go to a gas station, that price includes everything. So we can either continue not to have a gas tax like every other city in the county and give that additional profit to the gas station, or we can use it for something good where this money is not having to be made up somewhere else. 1% is what I'm proposing, which is half the average. If you take all of the cities and what they charge as a city gas tax, it's 2%. So I'm proposing half that, and we don't have an estimate on what that would be, but since we have a police jurisdiction, we do get half in a pretty big area. So I'm estimating that would be around $175,000 a year, and the lodging, actually, that's just for the rest of the year, the lodging. But the annual, when we get back on track, it's going to be a lot more than what I'm proposing that we spend, which would just help the operating budget in general.
Mayor, I'm going to
Yeah.
just tell you, I'm going to give you another minute, and then we're going to adjourn, and we're going to come back, and we'll open the meeting, and then we
Okay.
have your comments right then, and then council comments, so we just go right back into this discussion when we start
Okay.
our council meeting. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
All right, great. So go ahead and continue now, but we've
okay.
only got a couple of minutes before we have to start. I mean, is now a good stopping point since I
Yeah, sure.
since I interrupted you? Why don't we go ahead and adjourn the work session, and we'll come back, reconvene, and then we will give our invocation, pledge of allegiance, and we'll go right back into mayor's comments. Okay. All right? All right, thank you.